Hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about polymorphism, a concept of object-oriented programming and how to trace a program that has polymorphism in it. So basically what we are going to be looking at is how Java compiles a program and runs it and the errors that are produced during compile time and during runtime. Right. So, and also we are also going to be looking at casting, how an object is casted and what happens and how Java interprets the program. So we have this what you call a sample program like this. So there are like several classes. There is Frodo extends Bilbo, Gandalf, then Bilbo extends Gandalf and Gollum. So each of these classes are extended from something else, Gandalf being the parent class. And then there are instances created, but as you can see, the instances created are not of the same object and reference type. This part here on the left side of a variable, this part is it's called a reference type, and this part here after the new keyword is called an object. That means an object is created, a location is allocated in the memory. If new keyword was not used, no memory will be used, and classes do not take up any memory. Classes are basically just blueprints about how data will be stored, right? So in Java virtual machine during compile time, check is made on the reference type. So compiler is always concerned about the reference type. That means everything on the left side, that's what the compiler is concerned about. And Java runtime, Java virtual machine figures out the object type and could run the method that belongs to that particular object. So Java during runtime, it's always concerned about what happens on the right side of the equal sign. That is, it is always concerned about the object, and the compiler is concerned about the reference type. So, before we start running this program, the first step that you should do is to draw a tree diagram, and that's what I did here. So I drew a tree diagram, and Gandalf is the parent, but then again, object is like the parent of all the classes. So all the classes here are actually inherited from object. So object is like a common parent to all of it. So this is one part of the tree, and this is another part of the tree. This part is on the left side and this part on the right side, and Gollum cannot communicate with Bilbo. So and the same way Frodo cannot communicate with Gollum. Frodo can communicate with Bilbo. Bilbo can communicate with Gandalf, and vice versa. But Gollum can only communicate with Gandalf and object, but not the ones on the right side. Right. So after I've drawn the tree, I've also written down the methods concerned. So Gandalf has method 1, method 2. So I've written down what methods are in those classes. Like Gandalf class has method 1, method 2. Bilbo class has method 1. Right. So moving on, let's execute the program. So these are the instances created, and the methods that are called are these. So the methods that are called are var1.method1, and there are also some casting methods. So first we'll look at the normal methods that are done without the methods that are called without casting. I'll just do 3 examples, and then I'll move on to the casting type. So when var1.method1 is called, how will you execute it? Now there are some set of rules that you should remember while doing this kind of program. So the rules before casting. What should you consider for rules before casting? The things that you should consider is, during compiler, the first thing that you should consider is if it's giving a compiler error. If it's not, then move on to finding out if it's giving a runtime error. If it's not, then just run the program. So why we are always considering compiler first? Because of course a program is first compiled and then the program is run, or else how would you get all the code together, right? So the compiler interprets the code and sees whatever it's supposed to find out on the left side. That means it's considering only on the reference. It's considering only if the reference is valid, if the reference type of the instance is valid or not. So Gandalf var1. The main question is this, yeah. So Gandalf var1 equals new Frodo. Is this valid? Will this give a compiler error? So the first rule that's written here is that does the reference of the instance contain the method? Well, does the reference is Gandalf, and does Gandalf contain method 1? Let's look at the tree diagram. Yes, Gandalf does contain method 1. If it did not, then check the parent. Well, if Gandalf did not have contained method 1, we would have checked the parent. Well, parent is object here, but if we were in the Bilbo method, then and if suppose Bilbo did not have method 1, we would have checked Gandalf. And if even in the tree, even if the sorry, and if even in the parents that you don't find the method, then you'll give an error. So first you check in its own. So first it checks its own reference, and if its own reference has that method, if its own reference type has that method, and if it does not, it checks the parents, not the subclasses, just the parents. So it checks the parents one, and if the parent also doesn't have it, then you give out a compiler error. Right, so this does not give a compiler error. So var1.method1 will not give a compiler error because var1's left side is Gandalf, and Gandalf reference type has the method 1. So this is valid. Fine, now we'll look into runtime error. So var1.method1, what is on the right side? Frodo. Does Frodo contain method 1? Yep, Frodo does contain method 1. So this is also valid. So we'll just normally run the program. Now while running the program, as I said, in runtime, JVM figures out the object type, which is Frodo here, and then it could run the method on the object. So the method on Frodo is method 1. So we'll run method 1. Right, so let's look at the code here. Method 1. So Frodo's method 1 prints out Frodo 1. So we'll print out Frodo 1. Let's just write it down here. Frodo 1. So this is the first output, and then it's not over yet. As you can see, super.method1. Super means, the super keyword means that we are calling the parent, the immediate parent of this class. So Frodo's immediate parent is Bilbo. Now super.method1. So we'll call Bilbo's method 1. So Bilbo's method 1 prints out Bilbo 1. So our output will be Bilbo 1. Right. Now let's move on to var2.method1. var2's object type, var2's reference type is Gandalf. Does Gandalf contain method 1? Yes, as we've checked before. Fine. So compiler error will not be thrown here, or will not be given here. Now we check if on the right side for runtime, we consider the right side. So does Bilbo contain method 1? Yes, we have just seen here, we just printed it here, and again you could just look at your tree, and yes, Bilbo does contain method 1, so it won't give any error. So we'll just print out Bilbo 1. So Bilbo 1. Right. Next, var4.method1. var4 is object. Now as you can see, var4's left side is object. So now we check, does object contain method 1? No, object does not contain any method. Object is just on its own. It does not have any method specified. So therefore it will give out a compiler error. So I'll just write it as CE, which means compiler error. Now var6.method1. So var6 is object type. Again, does object contain method 1? No. So we get compiler error. Next, var1.method2. Does var1's reference type contain method 2? var1's reference type is Gandalf. Does Gandalf contain method 2? Yes, as you can see here. So we just print out whatever in var1.method2. Does var1 contain method 2? Gandalf contain method 2? Yes, so it's valid. Now we move on to runtime. So var1's so Frodo's method 2. So does Frodo contain method 2? Frodo does not contain method 2. So let's look at the tree. Frodo does not contain method 2. So we move on to the parent. Bilbo does not contain method 2. We move on to the parent. Gandalf contains method 2. So we'll print Gandalf's method 2's output. So Gandalf's method 2 is, where is it? If I could just find it. Right. So Gandalf's method 2 is Gandalf 2. So that was correct. Fine. So Gandalf 2. And then it's not over yet. We execute method 1. Now which method 1 are we going to execute? Gandalf's method 1 or what was the original one? var1.method2. So var1's is Frodo. So we'll execute actually the original object's method. So Frodo's method 1. If Frodo did not have method 1, but it actually does right now in this case, but if it did not have method 1, we would consider the parent that time. But since it does contain method 1, we'll always be giving priority to the original object's method. So Frodo's method, so let's see, Frodo's method 1 is Frodo 1. So we print out Frodo 1. It's still not over yet. So Frodo1, and after that we are calling super.method1. Now again we're just going to be calling the immediate parent of Frodo. Immediate parent of Frodo is Bilbo. Okay, so immediate parent of Frodo is Bilbo, and we'll be calling Bilbo's method 1. So Bilbo's method 1 just prints out Bilbo1. So we'll just be printing out Bilbo1. Right. Next, I will just move on to the last one over here, and I'll just write down the answer so you can check it after you've learned my method. Because if you just jot these rules down, just pause it, take a screenshot if you want to. If you just jot these rules down, then it will be much easier, because before casting, all you have to check is if the reference on the left side has that method or not. If it does, then no problem. But if it does not, check the parent. If its parent does not have it, then you give an error. Same goes with the runtime. Just check if the object contains the method or not. Again, let's remember what a reference and an object is. Reference is this one, and object is this one. Frodo is the object and Gandalf is the reference. Right, so that's done. Let's do the last one, var6.method2. So var6.method2. var6 is here. var6 1 is object. So object does not have method 2, of course, so it will give out a compiler error. Right. Okay, so now we look at the rules for casting. Now I've written down the answers here. In the end of the video, I'll just show you how the screen looks like, so you could take a screenshot or pause it and then check what your answers look, if your answers match or not. Right, so Frodo var4 method 3. Now let's look at the rules for casting. For casting, we have 4 sets of rules. Before casting, we just have 2 sets of rules, one for compiler and one for runtime. But here we have 2 sets of rules for each compiler and runtime. So let's check. Let's check if the casting reference and the original reference are in the same tree or not. So what does that mean? Casting reference here is Frodo, and original reference here, which is for Frodo var4. So original reference is object. Object is obviously in the same tree as Frodo, as we know that object is the parent of all classes. So they're in the same tree. It doesn't matter if it's a subclass or a superclass. If they're in the same tree, then it's valid. Fine. So if yes, then no error. Else, compiler error. Now, so this part is valid. So we move on to the next check. Next check is, does the casting reference contain that method? It's the same as the one we did before casting. That does the reference of the instance contain that method or not? Here we'll just check. In this case, we won't be checking the original ones. We'll be checking the one that we're casting it with. So we're casting var4 with Frodo. So Frodo var4, we would before, if there was no casting, we would just check if object has method 1 or not. But here we're casting it with Frodo. So, and since Frodo casting is valid, now we check if Frodo has method 1 or not. So let me just check if it says method 1 or not. Sorry, method 3. So does Frodo contain method 3? Frodo, yeah, Frodo contains method 3. So it's valid. Yes, so it's valid. Now we check if Frodo. Now we check for the runtime. So there's no compiler error. Now we go for runtime. Now what we do is, again, we're going to be considering the object. So can Frodo cast the object on the right side of var4? var4's right side has Bilbo. Can Frodo cast Bilbo? Well, the first thing we have to check is, are Frodo and Bilbo in the same tree or not? So Frodo and Bilbo, they're in the same tree. Fine. If so, then we move on to another if condition and ask ourselves, is Frodo the one that we're trying to cast? Is the caster, that is Frodo, is Frodo a superclass? If it's a superclass, then casting is possible. A parent can cast its child, but a child cannot cast its parent. So that's why Frodo is a child. So Frodo cannot cast its parent Bilbo. So that's why we'll get a runtime error. So we'll write it as RE. Next, Frodo var6.method2. var6 has object. So can object be casted by Frodo? Yes, they're in the same tree, possible. Next, we check if what we're casting with, that is Frodo, does Frodo contain method 2 or not? Well, let's look at the tree. So Frodo, it does not contain method 2. So no problem. We'll check the parent. Does Bilbo contain method 2? No. Does Gandalf contain method 2? Yes. So it's valid. So if we don't find the method in the original, same as before here, like we said, does the reference of the instance contain the method? If not, check the parent. If not found, then compiler. The same goes with this. Does the casting reference contain that method? If not, check the parent. If not, then compiler error. So yes, Gandalf has method too, so it's valid, so we won't get any compiler error. Next, we check for the runtime. So for runtime, we're trying to cast the object of var6 with Frodo. So let's see if that is valid. So we're trying to cast object of var6. So var6 object is Gollum. Can we cast Frodo? Can we cast Gollum with Frodo? Well, let's see if they're in the same tree. Nope, they're not in the same tree. So Frodo and Gollum are totally unrelated. They're not related with each other. If they were in the same tree, then we would have further checked if they were the subclass or superclass. So since they're unrelated, they're not in the same tree, we'll get a runtime error. Right. So we'll get a runtime error here. All right. Okay. So next we see. Next we see Gollum var1 method 3. Gollum var1 method 3. So Gollum var1. So we're trying to cast Gandalf to Gollum. Can we cast Gandalf to Gollum? Well, can we cast? Yeah. So Gandalf is a parent and Gollum is a child, and Gollum cannot cast what you call. Oh wait, sorry. For the compiler, we don't consider a parent or a child. So for the compiler, we're just saying they're in the same tree, right? Yeah. So they're in the same tree. It's valid. Then after that, we check if if Gollum, the caster is what? Gollum. If Gollum contains method 3, so it's valid. Fine. Now we move on to runtime. Runtime, we check if Gollum can cast the object on the right side. On the right side of var1, we have Frodo. Can Gollum cast Frodo? Nope, they are totally unrelated and they're not in the same tree, so we get a runtime error here. Then Gollum var4 method 1 again. So we check if Gollum can cast the reference of var4. var4's reference is object. Gollum and object are in the same tree, so we can this will not give a compiler error. Next we check if the caster, which is Gollum, if Gollum has method 1. Does Gollum have method 1? No, but Gandalf does, so it's valid. So we won't get any compiler error. Now we check for the runtime. For the runtime, we're trying to cast the object of var4. The object of var4 is Bilbo, and Gollum is trying to cast Bilbo. Well, they're unrelated again, so we get a runtime error. Next, we try to cast Gandalf of. So we're trying to cast the object, the reference of var1 with Gandalf. Is it valid or not? var1's reference is Gandalf, so Gandalf can obviously cast Gandalf. There's no casting required because they're the same reference types, so it's valid. Then we check if Gandalf contains method 2. Of course, Gandalf does contain method 2. That's valid. Now we move on to runtime. So does Gandalf have can Gandalf cast method 2? See, what the rules that I've stated are actually sequential. You can't do second one before and the first one later. You have to do sequentially. So first we check the casting, then we move on to running the program. So can Gandalf cast the object of var1? The var1's object is Frodo. Can Gandalf cast Frodo? Yes, because Gandalf is a parent and Frodo is a child, and parents can cast a child. So that's valid. Now we are moving on to running the program. So now look, we're trying to cast the object of var1, which is Frodo. Casting is just for checking if it can be casted or not, but when we are running the program, we're actually going to be considering the original object, not Gandalf. We're not going to be considering Gandalf for running. That means we're not going to run the program by running Gandalf's method 2. We're going to be running Frodo's method 2. So Frodo's method 2. So Frodo does not have method 2. Fine. We move on to parent. Doesn't have method 2. Fine. We move on to parent, and we'll be running Gandalf's method 2. So Gandalf's method 2. So the output is Gandalf's method 2, Gandalf 2, and then method 1. So first we write Gandalf 2. And then we run method 1. Now what is the original? What is the original one? Again, we're always going to be considering the original thing here. So what is the original? So this is Gandalf casting method 2, var1. So var1. So original object is Frodo. So we're going to be running Frodo's method 1. Again, the same thing applies here. We're not going to be running the parents one, which is Gandalf. Since we're in the Gandalf right now, it does not mean we're going to be running Gandalf's method 2, method 1. We're going to be running Frodo's method 1. Even though Gandalf has a method 1, we'll first give priority to the original object, and then if original object doesn't have it, then we'll consider the parent. So we run method 1 of Frodo. So Frodo has method 1, so here Frodo 1. Then it's not over yet. Then we get super.method 1. So super.method 1 is we're just going to be running the immediate parent of Frodo's method 1. So immediate parent of Frodo is Bilbo. So Bilbo's method 1. So Bilbo's method 1 is just Bilbo 1. Next, Frodo var4. I'm going to be doing this, and then I'm going to be moving on to the last one. Right. So Frodo var4 method 1. So Frodo var4 method 1. Frodo is trying to cast the reference of var4. var4's reference is object. Well, then the same tree can be casted. And then we're going to be considering if Frodo, the caster, has method 1 or not. Frodo has method 1. If it did not, we'll just be moving on to the parent, but it does. So, right, fine, it's valid. Then we're going to be running the program. Now, while running the program, so we're going to be checking if it can be casted or not. So, can Frodo cast the object of var4? Object of var4 is Bilbo. Can Frodo cast Bilbo? No, because Frodo is a child. Child cannot cast a parent. So, this will give out a runtime error. Next, like I said, I'll just do the second last one, then I'll be moving on to the last one. So Frodo var1 method 3. So can Frodo cast the reference type of var1? Frodo and Gandalf, they're in the same tree, so it can be casted. Then we consider if Frodo, the caster, has method 3 or not. Well, Frodo has method 3, so it's possible. So no compiler. Then we move on to running the program. So var1 method 3. So let's see if Frodo can cast the reference type of method of var1. So sorry, the object type of var1. So object type of var1 is Frodo. So Frodo can obviously cast Frodo. There's no casting required because they're the same object type. Then we consider, then we're running the program. So we're considering the original object. Even though they're the same, we'll just know that we're always considering the original object. So the original object's method 3 is this. So method 3. Let's run the method 3 of Frodo. So Frodo 3. So this output will be Frodo 3. Next, Gandalf var5 method 3. So Gandalf, can Gandalf cast the reference type of var5? var5's reference type is Bilbo. Can Gandalf cast Bilbo? Well, they're in the same tree, so yes, it's possible. Then we check if Gandalf has method 3, because caster, we check if the caster has method 3 or not. So does Gandalf have method 3? Gandalf, where is it? Yeah, so Gandalf does not have a method 3, and when it goes to the parent, well, object does not have any method 3. So like I said, when we don't find it in the original one, we move on to the parent. We don't go down, we always go up. So that's why this will give out a compiler error. But since there is a bit of more time, I'll just be doing the number 18. So number 18, Bilbo var6 method 2. Can Bilbo cast the reference type of var6? var6 reference type is object. Well, then the same tree, it's possible. Then we check if Bilbo has method 2. Does Bilbo have method 2? No. We move on to the parent, Gandalf. Gandalf has method 2, so it's valid. Now we move on to running the program. So can Bilbo cast the object type of var6? Object of var6 is Gollum. Can Bilbo cast Gollum? Well, they're not in the same tree, so we'll get an error. So runtime error. Gandalf var2. Can Gandalf cast var2? Sorry, can Gandalf cast the reference of var2? Reference of var2 is Gandalf, of course, possible. Then we check if Gandalf has method 1. Yes, Gandalf has method 1. Then compile. Then we go to the runtime. Can Gandalf cast the object of var2? Object of var2 is Bilbo. Can Gandalf cast Bilbo? Yes, because Gandalf is the parent, and parent can cast a child, so that's possible. Casting is just for checking, but for running, we always consider the original one. So where were we? Yeah, so var2's Bilbo. So we consider Bilbo's method 1. So Bilbo's method 1 is here. So we just print out Bilbo 1. Right, let's move on to the last one. Well, yeah, so the last one is Frodo Gollum var6. Can Gollum cast the object, the what you call the reference of var6, yes, because they're in the same tree. Now we consider if what you call if column and so since we can cast it, now we check if the caster has that method. So does Golem have method 2? Well, Golem does not have method 2, but Gandalf does, so there won't be any compiler error. Then we check for running. Now, can Golem cast the object of var6? Object of var6 is Golem. Of course, they're the same type. They can definitely cast. It can definitely be casted. Then we check if Golem, then we run the program. So we always be considering the original object. The original object is Golem. Even though the caster and the original object are the same, just look, if it was Bilbo here, and since it's Golem here, we'll be running Golem's method 2. So since they're the same, there's no problem. So Golem's method 2 is, Golem doesn't have method 2, so we'll be moving on to Gandalf's method 2. So we will just print Gandalf 2. Then we'll be printing method 1. So method 1 will be checking the original one. The original one was, what was it? So we are in var6. So var6 original one is Golem. So we'll be checking if Golem has method 1 or not. So Golem does not have any method 1. So again, so now since we didn't find in the original one, we jump to the parent again. So we'll just be printing Gandalf 1. Right, so this was it. I hope you understood the whole tutorial. So this is the whole answer for, this is the actual answer for this. I hope this concept is clear. You just check the answer, you do the whole tracing by on your own and then check the answer. And I hope the outputs are the same, because it might be if you follow the rules. And also take a screenshot or pause it and check your answers. And again, the rules are the main thing that makes it all happen. First you draw a tree, then you distinguish between what will happen in the compiler and what will happen in the runtime. Before casting we have 2 rules. After casting, during while, like when the instances are of casting, when we're casting in instances, the rules are different. There are 4 rules. There are 2 rules without casting, and there are 4 rules with casting. Read these rules again, watch this tutorial again, and I hope your concept will be cleared after that. And if not, then I don't know, watch it again, I guess. So I hope you understood. Please subscribe and give a thumbs up. And